Welcome to our HistoReddit channel, to our journey of justice, where one man has dedicated an entire decade to reversing the life of a cheater. A little over 10 years ago, when I was a young carpenter, I crossed paths with an individual who called himself Chad. Chad was a recent hire at the company I worked for, and despite the 10-year age difference between us, he didn't hesitate to collaborate as my sidekick. We form a solid partnership. We worked side by side for 6 months until Chad suggested the idea of starting a joint venture. He believed that together we could lead a team and build houses. After consulting with my girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time and is now my wife, we decided that the best option for me was to remain an employee, but with a 50% stake in the business for tax and insurance reasons. Chad agreed to this arrangement, so we started outlining our responsibilities. Chad would be in charge of looking for work, as I look younger than I am, and it wouldn't instill confidence in clients if they thought my partner was only 16 years old. In addition, he would take care of insurance, payroll, and other financial aspects. My role was to manage the team, administer the project, and keep the budget balanced. Tasks that I performed with ease. In addition to an hourly wage, I would receive 50% of the profits after all business expenses. In subsequent months, the company prospered. Our team was well coordinated, we had a few homes under construction, and we even secured a contract for a 10,000 square foot custom project with multiple annexes. Things were going really well. However, Chad started to act recklessly with the money. He bought 2 Chevy pickup trucks for a total of $2,500 and replaced them with a new Jeep Wrangler. Shortly thereafter, the Jeep was submerged and mysteriously set on fire while exploring off-road trails. Still, Chad didn't give up and quickly acquired a gleaming 2500 Power Wagon, which also ended up in the underwater depths a few weeks later. I didn't notice the warning signs at the time, as I rarely interacted with Chad in person. He was responsible for the business side, while I was focused on the practical execution of tasks. However, I continued with my dedication. I finished the foundation of the project and received the check from the builder. Although he mentioned that we went over budget by 25%, he was impressed with the work we accomplished. But, instead of billing the extra amount, I preferred to apologize and request a new check for the amount effectively executed. The builder agreed and expressed his satisfaction at having honest people working on his project. Our trajectory was marked by challenges and upheavals, but perseverance and integrity were our greatest allies. I am generally not involved with managing checks and rarely review accounting records, as this was not within my primary responsibilities. This led me to log into our corporate account and realize that we were in such dire financial straits that we could barely afford a red safety pin, let alone cover employee salaries. This situation brought to the fore the tension between me and Chad, causing a rift in trust. He apologized and promised to contribute funds from his own personal profits to balance the situation. I got ready to go back to work on Monday, only to find that I was deleted from the toolbox, my name removed from all accounts, and a letter taped to the box announcing my resignation for unspecified reasons. A feeling of anger overtook me, as I did not understand how, as a partner, I could be dismissed so abruptly. I soon found a new job and focused on moving forward. But what came next shocked me. I was informed that Chad was smearing my name around town, blaming me for financial losses and making damaging statements about my work ethic, business skills, mental stability, and personal life. I decided to take action and began documenting every interaction with Chad, keeping a detailed journal and copies of all relevant text messages, voicemails, and photos. This was the phase in which the search for justice began to gain strength. I decided to consult my late father's attorney, who advised me to pursue a fraud and misappropriation investigation through the Canadian Revenue Agency, CRA, Canada's equivalent of the IRS. I contacted vendors and checked that payments were being made correctly, only to find that many debts were not honored. I also talked to the builder we were working for and shared the information. The truth came out. Chad had embezzled about $30,000 in unpaid payments, in addition to stealing an additional $15,000 in cash and office equipment. Moved by justice, I contacted the car insurance companies, providing photos of the sunken vehicles and a video of Chad setting fire to his own Jeep. The insurance company initiated legal proceedings against Chad, resulting in formal charges and a considerable financial burden. For the past 9.5 years, I have tirelessly narrated to anyone who would listen about my experience with Chad. Essentially, his actions alienated him from the carpentry industry in the region. However, the story does not end there. Years have passed, and the feeling of displeasure still persists. Then I get an unexpected call from someone offering a job. It was the builder, the same person Chad had wronged earlier. After explaining my story and the consequences of Chad's actions, he offered me the job with substantial benefits. I accepted the offer and, as a first step, decided to find legal ways to deal with Chad. Determined not to leave things lying around, I found out where Chad was living and working. The new boss contacts the company where Chad is working and, in a cheerful tone, announces his resignation. In the meantime, I connect with Chad's landlord and detail his conduct, which results in him being evicted for non-payment of rent. Looks like he was several months late. I also got his girlfriend's phone number and explained to her the way Chad operates and his long list of questionable practices, including but not limited to fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, and more. In the middle of all this, there was the matter of his truck, which he couldn't insure due to the fraud he committed. I promised my girlfriend that I would take care of it, and when contacting the insurance company, I explained the situation. I was told he didn't even have a driver's license, and the insurance company dropped coverage on his girlfriend's truck. Faced with this situation, I decided to personally deal with the issue, as I was aware of what was happening. I waited for the right moment and, seeing an unidentified police vehicle, I quickly approached and explained the situation. The police decided to act when they saw Chad, and they did. He was approached and, when answering the phone, uttered a series of insults and curses. This led the police to issue tickets for reckless driving, not wearing a seatbelt, not having a license, and using a handheld device while driving. Meanwhile, the girlfriend consented to search the truck, where several fake IDs, stolen credit cards, ATM skimming devices, and a fake police badge were found. He was arrested on the spot. The police then obtained permission to search the residence where he lived, now his girlfriend's house, after being evicted. In the garage, they found a large collection of stolen tools, many of which belonged to the builder I worked for. Surprisingly, these tools were still labeled with the company's inventory control stickers. This led to more accusations, and Chad remained in police custody until his trial date. Justice, as is well known, is often slow, and the trial date was set for 17 months in the future. My boss, whom Chad had ripped off, opted out of the hearing, but the sight of Chad squirming and facing the consequences was satisfying. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after half time served, as well as a $100,000 fine and 1,000 hours of community service upon his release. It was a day of justice finally achieved. I witnessed her being escorted out of court twice. Never underestimate the power of determination of someone quiet and Chad. Therefore, the protagonist of this story is a true stalker, but his objective was to bring Chad to justice, not for revenge, but for doing what was right. Meanwhile, in a lighter tone, I remember visiting a friend's house, in an area so steep that the sidewalks have to be curved to adapt to the road. The main issue with the houses was that a direct driveway was not feasible due to the steep incline that the building code would not allow to drive over. A few doors down, lived a lovely elderly couple, who until recently had a vacant lot next to their house. However, the lot was sold, and the new owner started building a new house. Unfortunately, the terrain was so steep that the new owner built part of his garage on the old couple's land. An excavator carved the slope for this purpose. Perhaps we wouldn't be talking about this story if the new owner had kindly approached the old couple first and sought an agreement, but he didn't. The moment I tell this story, it's because it didn't happen. The elderly couple had no idea what was going on until the day they returned home to find a large scar on the hillside that ran from the road to the front of their house and turned towards the new neighbor's property. They were extremely upset. Being educated and reasonable people, they initially believed it to be an honest mistake. They went to talk to the excavator operator, but he had no relevant information. However, he provided the new owner's phone number. The elderly couple contacted him and courteously explained the situation. However, the new neighbor, whom they had never met, vehemently denied that the driveway crossed the property line. He was brusque to the point of making the elderly couple deeply upset. By this time, the elderly couple were at a loss. They checked the property markers to be sure of their information, which proved to be correct. Despite this, after further conversations with the new owner, it became clear that he was unreasonable and unwilling to resolve the issue amicably. The elderly couple was hesitant to take legal action, as it would be costly and, moreover, the damage to the backyard landscape had already been done. But at the same time, they couldn't allow anyone to insult them, especially considering they lived next door and would have to live with the situation for the foreseeable future. The situation remained at an impasse during the construction of the new house. One day, a friend's father crossed paths with the elderly couple in the neighborhood, and the conversation flowed. Naturally, they shared the frustrating story about their new neighbor. My friend's father felt a bond with the elderly couple, who were kind and loving people. He was uncomfortable with the situation. When he got home, he couldn't get it out of his head. That night, after a few beers, a brilliant idea occurred to him. He called the elderly couple, shared his idea, and asked permission to move forward. They laughed and agreed. So my friend's dad jumped into his rusty old pickup truck, which he kept as a secondary vehicle. He drove up to the elderly couple's house and parked on the other side of the encroaching driveway. He made sure his vehicle was completely within his own property. The next morning, the work crew arrived early to find they couldn't go ahead with construction, as someone had parked an old, battered F-150 in the driveway. They found a note on the windshield with my friend's dad's phone number on it. so they called him to ask what was going on. He explained that he had the owner's permission to park there, and that he had no intention of moving the truck so they could continue work. Furthermore, he warned that any attempt to tow the vehicle would result in trespassing and theft charges. The construction workers understandably didn't want to get involved in a legal battle, and given the difficulty of lugging all the tools up the hill, they decided to take the day off. And they wouldn't stop until the property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner was furious when contacted, but the elderly couple repeated what my friend's father had told the construction workers. Basically, the vehicle was parked on his property, and he was supposed to handle it himself. To make an already lengthy story short, the new neighbor initially complained but eventually realized the need to have his house built. The friendly elderly couple accepted a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement that would allow the driveway to run around the edge of their property. As a thank you, my friend's father received several cases of beer and the satisfaction of having put things in their right place. In this story, the father is like a country Batman, defending the innocent with beer and a pickup truck. Years ago, shortly after graduating from high school, I got a new job to support me through college. The job was at a pet store, where I worked in the fish, aquarium, reptile, and bird department. The store manager named Kurt was an amazing man. He was the type who had worked hard all his life, going to work and then coming home. He didn't expect more than that from anyone. My direct supervisor in the department was a woman named Stephanie, who could be described as a grumpy and unpleasant person. It soon became apparent that I knew more about reptiles than she did, as my experience with snakes over the last few years gave me an advantage. She preferred dealing with fish. However, her ego wouldn't allow her to deal with a new team member who didn't need her guidance. The relationship got off to a bad start, with Stephanie quickly realizing that I was well versed in reptiles, an area in which she felt less confident. She became especially hostile when she realized I didn't need constant guidance from her. She assigned me the job of cleaning the goldfish tanks while other employees handled sales. Under her supervision, my work environment became toxic. She would make nasty comments, like claiming I was the weak link on the team, or that I was causing problems in the department. About a year later, my hours have been reduced by approximately 25%. I asked the store manager about the situation, and he informed me that our department was recording significant losses due to the drop in sales and damage to merchandise. Recently, Stephanie has started to pay more attention to her customers, often serving them in person. Meanwhile, she relegated us to busy jobs, claiming they were busy with customers. One night, a customer was praising Stephanie and her customer service. We found out that she was raising animals such as dogs, turtles, and mice and selling them to customers she knew in our store, which resulted in lost sales for us. Our store adhered to strict corporate policies, such as not selling rats as live food for snakes, as well as making a significant contribution to animal shelters and rejecting commercial breeding of dogs and cats. However, Stephanie was profiting from selling animals to customers, while our department was experiencing cutbacks for all employees. It was hard to understand how this was impacting our finances until one night the truth started to come out. I realized that Stephanie was a lazy woman, but something didn't add up. When a customer came in, she was right next to them the entire time. Watching closely, I watched as she accompanied a customer, assisting him in selecting an array of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies, such as lights and lamps. Intrigued, I followed in her footsteps and wrote down each item she picked up, wanting to understand what was going on. She directed the customer to the cashier and I went to verify the purchase. However, I noticed that she never did this to other customers and acted strangely. The suspicion arose that she was abusing coupons or applying deep discounts in a questionable manner. I decided to seek support from my coworkers to corroborate my story about unrecorded sales and suspicious behavior. So I reported everything to Kurt, the manager. I gave him a list of about 20 UPC codes and the time they occurred. I believed that if he reviewed the transactions in Register 2 from the previous night, he would find a large discount applied to it. He was confused and I explained my suspicion in detail. I clarified that I didn't want to make rash accusations, but after observing Stephanie's pattern, I was sure something was wrong. Kurt thanked him and promised to look into it. A few weeks later, while at work, I noticed Kurt standing by the door, watching intently. Stephanie was coming in for his shift, and as soon as he walked through the door, he called her into his office. A regional manager for the company was there, going over the list I'd provided Kurt and looking up the previous night's transactions. Although some transactions had fewer items than I had listed, all items on the receipt matched my list. During a few weeks of observation, they discovered that Stephanie personally walked customers to the register, placing expensive items in their carts without registering them. This practice led to huge merchandise donations totaling over $1,500 and an excessive increase in broken merchandise signed by her. Evidence pointed to the systematic theft and fraud of over $3,500 worth of merchandise. Kurt had already taken steps, scheduling a meeting with the police to accompany her until her dismissal. I don't know if she was arrested, but I witnessed her exit escorted by the police, with about 20 employees watching me. I gave her a quick wink as she left, sorry but knowing it was necessary. And so Stephanie, the same one who handled fish and liked to check out customers' aquarium equipment, ended up being discovered in her suspicious actions. The truth came out, marking the end of their questionable practices. It's fascinating how the quest for revenge can manifest itself in so many ways, like this story that took years to unfold, revealing some people's hidden motivation. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future stories. Leave a like to show us your support and turn on the notification bell to receive alerts whenever we share an intriguing new real-world story. At HistoReddit, we are always ready to bring you the best stories, full of twists, emotions and valuable lessons. Until the next story.